Rebecca Pritchard built her reputation quietly, and that's precisely what made losing her so jarring for the people who had watched. For years, she was the steady anchor of Salvage Hunters, the antiques and historical preservation television series on Quest TV that turned overlooked objects into stories worth caring about. When she disappeared from the screen, viewers didn't just register the absence, they felt it. The woman who could look at a forgotten Victorian sideboard or a rusted piece of industrial machinery and immediately tell you its age, its origin, and the story of every hand it had passed through had simply stopped appearing. No farewell episode, no industry interview, no statement from the network or from anyone close to her. She was present through every season, and then she was gone, and the questions that followed have never fully been answered. Born on February 19, 1958 in the United Kingdom, Rebecca came into the antiques world the long way around, through two entirely different industries, before salvage ever became part of her vocabulary. Her first career had nothing to do with restoration. Nearly 20 years of her working life went into the fashion industry, split between Hong Kong and the UK, covering wholesale, manufacturing, and retail across both markets. That kind of work builds a particular kind of intelligence that classroom training rarely replicates. You learn to assess quality fast, to recognize value where others see clutter, and to make sound decisions under pressure without the comfort of extensive deliberation. By the time she left fashion entirely, those instincts were woven into how she approached everything that came after. Property development followed, and Rebecca chose the harder version of it. Rather than new builds or straightforward commercial projects, she focused on restoring old and historic buildings, Georgian townhouses, aging farmhouses, period structures that most property developers would have demolished rather than invested in saving. The work demanded genuine respect for what those buildings had been before neglect set in, and she brought that respect to every project. Real estate restoration of that kind sits at the intersection of practical problem-solving and historical sensitivity, and it placed her directly inside the world of architectural design, heritage regulations, and period craftsmanship. It was also the world where she eventually crossed paths with Drew Pritchard, a well-known architectural antiques dealer with a reputation for finding pieces others had written off entirely. Their knowledge fitted together almost from the moment they met, and what grew from that shared passion eventually became something far larger than either of them had planned. Salvage Hunters began airing in 2011 on Quest TV, and the concept was stripped back. Drew traveled to source antiques and salvage pieces, while Rebecca handled the valuations, historical research, and restoration advice that gave each find its proper weight. What made the reality television series work, though, was that neither of them was performing. Her knowledge was genuine, the calm she projected was genuine, and the way she explained the background behind an object, accessible without being oversimplified, detailed without being academic, was something audiences recognized and trusted almost from the first season. Fans who discovered the show later often went back and watched earlier episodes specifically because of how naturally she moved through the material. She never looked like someone who had been placed in front of a camera and asked to explain things. She looked like someone who genuinely couldn't stop thinking about where objects came from and what they had meant to the people who owned them. That quality, unrehearsed and unhurried, gave the show its backbone. She also appeared in Salvage Hunters, The Restorers, the spin-off series built around the craftspeople working off camera to bring damaged pieces back to condition. And that series leaned harder on her expertise than anything that had come before it. What television never illustrated was the pressure behind the role. Valuations had to be accurate and fast, often filmed without meaningful preparation time. Historical context had to be solid enough to hold up to scrutiny from viewers who knew the subject. The production schedule was relentless. Running alongside all of that, her property restoration work carried its own complications. Unexpected structural issues, heritage listing constraints, costs that could shift the entire economics of a project midway through. None of it showed on screen. What viewers saw was the composure, and behind that composure was someone managing considerably more than the camera ever captured. By the mid-2010s, she had become one of the most recognized figures in British antique dealing, a specialist world she had helped bring to a mainstream audience, without ever appearing to need the attention that came with it. And that is precisely where the personal story begins to pull against the professional one, because the partnership driving the show was also a marriage, and marriages under that kind of sustained, camera-facing pressure do not always hold. Rebecca and Drew had built their life together long before television arrived. They shared a business, raised a family, and brought all of that accumulated history into every episode, whether it registered on screen or not. The dynamic that made them compelling as a television pairing. Drew moving fast on instinct, Rebecca grounded in precision and careful judgment, created friction in private that built quietly over years. The pressure of filming together, running a business together, and managing the growing public interest in their lives produced a weight that was easy to miss from the outside. Their partnership looked effortless on screen because they had years of practice making it look that way. Stories began circulating in their hometown of Conwy in North Wales, linking Drew's name to alleged affairs. One account described a confrontation at the Liverpool Arms pub involving a man named Janice Thomas, who reportedly challenged Drew after learning of an involvement with his wife. Witnesses described a physical exchange, with some reports indicating Drew had sent taunting messages before the confrontation took place. Thomas was later reported to have been banned from pubs across Conwy and required to pay fines, though neither party ever confirmed the full sequence of events publicly. Rebecca stayed completely silent throughout all of it, which was entirely consistent with how she had always responded to anything that touched her private life. In 2017, the marriage ended. Separation was confirmed that year, and the divorce finalized shortly after, catching most fans genuinely off guard. Nothing on screen had suggested anything was wrong. They were still composed, still professional, still presenting as the partnership audiences had spent years watching. Neither gave interviews. No statements were released. The split was confirmed, and then the conversation around it was simply closed. What struck viewers most was what followed. She continued appearing on Salvage Hunters alongside Drew as a professional colleague, carrying the same measured approach she had always brought to the show. Those who watched carefully noticed the differences. Fewer shared scenes, less of the easy back and forth that had once come so naturally, but the mutual respect remained visible. She did not allow a personal collapse to become a professional one, and for anyone who has tried to manage something similar under far less public scrutiny, the difficulty of what she was doing day after day was not hard to appreciate. Then the changes in her appearance became something fans couldn't stop discussing. Across the later seasons, Rebecca looked noticeably slimmer, and the shift was gradual enough that by the time it dominated comment sections, it had clearly been building for some time. Some viewers speculated about illness. Others connected it to years of accumulated stress, the divorce, the public scrutiny, the sustained demands of television production. The show offered no response. Rebecca offered nothing either. No medical reports surfaced, no health statements were released, and nothing pointed definitively toward a serious underlying condition. Her Instagram account, updated only occasionally, showed someone who appeared well and still engaged with restoration work and antique pieces she cared about. People who encountered her at antique fairs during that period described the same warmth and calm she had always projected. The weight loss remains unexplained, and based on the consistent pattern of choices Rebecca has made since leaving the show, it will probably stay that way. When Quest TV posted a short reel titled, "Goodbye Rebecca," clips, a message of thanks, nothing beyond that. Something long open quietly closed. No final episode, no official industry statement, no explanation from the network or the production team about the reasons or the timeline. The audience responded with years of accumulated appreciation. Tribute videos appeared across social platforms. Comment threads filled with specific moments people had carried with them, and viewers who had never met her described the absence as something they felt unexpectedly. That kind of response doesn't come from passive watching. It comes from years of trusting someone on screen and realizing, only after they've gone, how much that trust had become something you relied on. The show had run for more than a decade by that point, and her departure removed something no replacement could easily replicate. Not just expertise, but the specific quality of attention she brought to every object she discussed. Drew Pritchard announced his own exit from the program eventually, stepping away to focus on his antiques business and architectural salvage yard after more than a decade as the show's central figure. Salvage Hunters continued, but questions surfaced over time, whether buying and negotiation scenes had been shaped through editing for dramatic effect, whether tight production schedules had occasionally pushed filming into moments that didn't align with genuine market conditions. Dealers in the antiques trade argued at various points that the show had raised public interest in salvage pieces to a level that distorted market prices. None of it erased what had been built, but it added a complicated layer to the legacy that Rebecca and Drew had helped create together across those early seasons. Away from all of that, Rebecca has continued doing the work that defined her before television arrived. private valuations, consulting for collectors and dealers, occasional posts that offer glimpses of restoration projects and period interiors. The same career, lived without an audience tracking every move. The antiques world she operates in now is smaller and quieter than television, but it's also the one that existed before the cameras arrived, and by most accounts, it suits her considerably better than the version the public got to see. Private consulting work doesn't come with production schedules or the obligation to be interesting on demand. It rewards exactly what she has always had, a genuine understanding of objects, their histories, and what they are actually worth to the people who care about them. She hasn't remarried. No new relationship has surfaced publicly. Her address somewhere within the United Kingdom remains her own business. What she has communicated clearly, through every choice since leaving the show, is that the life she's building now is deliberately her own, away from the speculation, away from the noise, and away from the versions of her story that other people continue trying to finish on her behalf. Rebecca Pritchard came into television through fashion and property development, built one of British factual television's most respected careers, navigated a very public divorce with more composure than most people manage private ones, and then stepped back without ceremony. What happened to her after Salvage Hunters is not a story of tragedy. It is the story of a woman who decided, on her own schedule and by her own measure, that she had given enough to the spotlight, and that everything she genuinely valued had been somewhere quieter the whole time.